All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Verses Live, where we talk all things poetry.
We do that.
My name is Jeff.
My name is Matthias, but sometimes they call me Jeff.
They
But
never call him Jeff.
Mostly because
They
they're
literally
wrong
never
about
call
that.
him Jeff.
They're typically wrong about it.
Although I have a twin brother, and people will call him.
He actually
Jeff
looks like his twin.
occasionally. Especially when I
Imagine,
cut my hair.
yeah, imagine him right now, and like that's his twin brother, which you really couldn't say about most siblings. But
Nah,
for-
see, he has a. I can look like him, but he has a hard time looking like me. If that makes sense, it's weird. Sometimes I'm making videos and I'm like, oh my gosh, I look just like Greg.
is it kind of like in Pokemon when they evolve, but they can't devolve?
Am I the evolved form of Greg?
No, I think it sounds like Greg's the evolved one because he can't look like you, so he can't
I don't need to
devolve.
take this as-
It sounds like Greg should be running this
a
podcast.
very where's my we have a very special guest today. Before we introduce her,
I feel like that
though,
sound animation's not long enough. It should have been. It should have
but
been
if I
longer.
drag it out, the thing is it goes really bassy because the frequency lowers.
Oh, that's fair.
But anyways,
All right.
take a look at our guest. Give me one sec.
I wonder if the sky has finally given up on us. Studying astrology killed the wonder of the stars. Even the land seems to believe that's enough.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Okay, can we have a discussion about how the drama? Now I'm a part of the audience, and I'm just like, who's gonna solve the murder? But it's like this is just a podcast about
I
poems.
literally know it really was giving like true crime in the best way. That
Yeah.
was so exciting.
Now we have to figure. Now one of us is guilty, and I don't know of what it is. It now we have to just.
But we are
Sit
very, very, very happy to announce that Ariana Benson has won the Ruth Lily. Give me that golf. No, not. All right, we can do that one. I was thinking more of this one. But
I feel like it's
Oh wait, that should have been a.
We're just gonna press all of them.
Yeah.
No, I
Congratulations.
love the Mike Breen bang. I love it.
Thank you. That's what I'm
I
saying.
love the Mike Breen bang. Actually, no, that's the one where Steph hit that like 40-foot shot on the Thunder, isn't it? That's that
Yeah.
bang.
I mean,
Oh,
well,
we're talking basketball then. Okay.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Listen, when he did that, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, so basketball's over because there's not a way that a guy's doing that and you're just like, I'm gonna play against him in this game.
Why? No, I fully would have given up. I would have walked off the court and be like, okay, so we're just gonna dub all our games versus the Warriors. That's it. There's no guarding that.
That's well, I mean, Kevin Durant was like, it feels like I should be on the other side of this.
Yeah, don't talk
It feels like I should be over there.
Oh, that ruined my
He should have
day.
just switched his jersey right there. He should have just been like, hey guys, this guy.
Yes. You know, I will admit, I'm even extra salty about the Kevin Durant move because I'm a Lakers fan. So that same summer that the Warriors got Kevin Durant for that contract, you know who we went out and signed to a $100 million contract? Timofey Mozgov. Like,
Yeah.
the pain from that, I'm not over it. Even though we like beat them last year, I'm still not over it. I never will be.
Yeah. It was a sad. Last season was especially sad, I think, for me because it felt like a very the way we got beat. It felt like okay, like it's decided. They are. It's not even like we're not in the same league as these guys.
That's not true though. I mean, every game was like could have gone either way.
But if it only goes 4, that means that's a decision. If every game could have went every way, but it only goes 4,
but like it was always like a competitive, nice competitive.
he sounds like the media, like on the.
Give me that other. Yes, give me that.
Oh, brother.
Wow.
Yeah, you guys are doing great things. You guys are doing great things. James Harden seems like he's a real homer guy. He's there to stay.
He's ready to play. He's gonna be in playing shape come October.
No.
Mhm.
Yeah. Playing what you say?
Player on the Lakers is almost 40 years old.
Jeff, I
think
can't
that's
hear
a
you too
great-
well. Can you turn your
Yes.
mic up a little?
Uh-huh.
That's
I
better.
think it's great. Is that better?
Yeah.
I just think it's great that the best player on the Lakers is almost 40 years old.
I think it's great too because
I
he's
think that's
simultaneously the best player that's ever played the game. So we can and you can say that, but
Yeah.
it's like, what has Joel Embiid done in his Oh, the one MVP
Beg an
where in
MVP.
which after he won the MVP, he didn't play the
was
last
playing
2
on, like, a
games
knee.
of his. Oh man,
Look.
that's great.
All right, look, we're gonna shift over to things because believe it or not, Ariana just won a big prize.
You did want it.
Yeah.
But and I think I actually discovered Ariana. Ariana, I discovered how you won your prize, and you know how you showed off your literary genius.
Okay.
It's no longer a secret.
Okay.
See, the thing is, you have to look at people's social media stuff.
Ah.
Look at this. Airy. Literariana. Look at this is how Ariana. I see it. I see what you did there.
All in the
Look at
branding.
you.
All in the branding.
Hey, that's the thing. That's the thing.
That's what was your reaction? So like when you like what time of day did you find out? Like when did you know?
Down to
Okay,
the
so this is funny. I really played myself. Y'all will be like the first to hear the story. I really played myself. So, you know, like if you're waiting for a call for like a job or something, right? Like you are nervous, you're waiting for the phone to ring, like you think it's gonna ring. And I had gotten an email a few weeks prior. So this news came, let's say like at the end of July. And I had gotten an email like towards the beginning that said, hey, you're a finalist, you're one of 12, we're gonna narrow it down to 5, we're working on it, blah, blah, blah. And so I figured that they had kind of been veering towards coming to a decision because they had said we're going to decide by August 1st. And so I had been waiting for the call, so anxious, like just to see if I get it, if I don't, you know, whatever. I take a nap because that's what I do. Naps are my hobby. And I didn't turn on my phone ringer. So I missed the first call. So a number calls me, it's a Chicago phone number. I am a nerd, so of course, like I know to Google a phone number to see who it is. It matches the email from the person from the Poetry Foundation. So I was like, oh my God, is it them? But if it's them, like were they calling about that or were they just calling to ask me a question? And then it was the end of the work. So I had to wait a whole night, no voicemail, because I switched my phone a few months ago. So I didn't set up my voicemail box, which my dad told me about. Listen to your dad's.
That's a life lesson right there. Everyone watching, please. This is the moment.
If you don't take anything else from this interview, please set your voicemail box up.
Somebody could be calling you to give you $27,000 and you miss it, and then have to spend a night in anxious anticipation trying to figure out. So I eventually the next day called back, and then they didn't answer. Called back and left a message. Then the person called me back and was like, yes, you won the Ruth Lily.
We've been hunting you down to give you, and you just are refusing.
I was trying to give you money.
But you know what? Since you don't want to have a voicemail.
Calling it back, and it's like a fake number. And it's like, we're here to contact you about your car's limited warranty and blah, blah, blah. Like, devastation.
Is it weird? Like, I'm the guy who listens. I at least hear him out because I'm like, maybe my limited warranty is running out. And then I just realized it already ran out years ago. So
I don't even, I mute the call because that just continues to encourage them. I'm like, I'm still trying to make them think that the number isn't active. So I don't even like reject the call. I just swipe it away.
That's fair. Well, I feel like that kind of anticipation is really, I don't know, what is the last thing that I was like really in like into, maybe like a new job, you know what I mean? Like it's like, you know, I'm thinking like, man, like I'm about to, I don't know if I have this job or I don't know if I don't have this job, like maybe, but like I think when it comes to things in the art world or things that you're doing as a creative, like those kind of spaces of really intense anticipation and can cause like a little bit of an anxiety as well. And like you're like, this is no small feat, you know, this isn't like, oh, like I'm wondering, you know, who won this $100 slam that I was in yesterday. Yeah. You know, like it's like a really huge price. Like what was that waiting period like?
Horrible. I was in the shower for an hour just trying to be like, you know, it's okay if you don't win. You don't need it. Like, you'll be all right. It's okay. You're a great poet. Tough it up. Don't be so stressed about the money. And I was like talking to my mom, talking to my brother, having him distract me because it's just the waiting that is honestly to me worse than rejection. You are a poet, you get, you know, pretty thick skin to rejection, or at least I have, honestly. So I'm used to the rejection, but the waiting on the edge of the potential, it seems like a possible, probable yes, that about killed me.
Yeah, because they said it was you're supposed to know on August 1st.
Yeah, it was like by August 1st. So it was getting really, really close to that deadline. And so, of course, like I'm checking every spam call is like a potential. And then I knew that it was them because it was a Chicago number. I Googled the number like a stalker and saw that it was the grants person from the Poetry Foundation calling. And so I was like, well, it is them. But what if they just have a question? Or what if they're calling to reject, which I feel like is a heinous practice that nobody should engage in? It could have been that. It could have been a lot of different things. So it was just, it was a lot of possibilities swirling in my mind. But then the next morning, those were quelled, and I was able to celebrate.
So you talked to them on the phone eventually.
Did, yes. Had a nice.
Can we role play really quick how that call went? I just want to like imagine. I'm just like,
can I have like what kind of, if you had to pick a kind of voice that this person had, like name like a movie character that you're like, this is what this person sounded like, and then between me and Jeff, we're gonna figure out if we can role play this person, because these are things that that our audience is really interested in. Our audience almost exclusively wants to hear impressions of tense phone calls.
I'm trying to think. Okay, so it felt like I was talking to like
AI voice.
No, it was like Maya, what's her name? From SNL. But when she's doing an impression of like a professional woman, it was like, hello.
Oh.
Yes, is this Ariana Benson? Yes, we were trying to.
They want your money.
It was Ariana Benson.
It was very like.
And I just want to let you know that I have a bag of money.
And that we have been privileged to tell you that yes, you did win the prize. And it was like clear, I think, that she could tell how nervous I was, and so it was like, okay, yes, chill out, you did win. Like, deep breaths now. Don't call this number no more, because I had called back a couple of times to see. So yeah, it was that. So,
how loudly did you scream into the phone?
I held it in, and it was a long time too. That phone call was like 5 minutes because she had information to give me, and she was like, "We're going to do this meeting, and I just want to make sure you're prepared about this." I had to hold it in, but as soon as after, no, like scream, like literally scream and run around. I mean, I'm doing like the Fortnite emotes. I'm like hitting the gritty in my parents. I was having a great time.
Yeah, because I'm sure there's going to be like a lot of stuff coming in like after today, right? So there's going to be a lot more like movement that you're going to have to do kind of in this window of time. But like, that moment where you're like, well, like the weight's off your shoulders and that you have it. Like, what were those moments like? Was it like a lot of excitement, or was it like calming? Like kind of where were you at?
That is an extreme feeling of relief, especially with, this Ruth Lily is not really something that you just kind of apply for once or you apply for on a whim, right? This was my third time applying. I had the poems read by a really good friend of mine who's in the MFA at the program, David Emke, and he put them in an order for me, and he explained the order. Like it was, you really do kind of have to rely on people to help you put together this packet. These were poems that I also wrote a while ago. They weren't new, and so I was just sick of looking at them. But it's a process that you have to put a lot into, especially they've lengthened it. And so you have to answer questions about how do you engage with community? What do you think, or who do you think your poetry is in conversation with? And so it was a big investment in terms of like an application, and also just a big investment of hope, right? People know what the Ruth Lily means for you as a poet, as your career. People know what $27,000 means. So you feel that like there's so much riding on it. And I think that too definitely leads to like the anticipation, anxiety that I felt. So honestly, even more than just like joy and excitement, initially I felt relief. I was like, oh my gosh, I can sleep peacefully, because I'm somebody who needs answers. Even if it's a no, if it's a rejection, cool, we move on. But the not knowing was really what was tense for me. And then the knowing was a yes. And so that was cool.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot on the podcast, and Jeff actually is one of the people that is like the biggest advocates for it, like that I know of. Just the work that you're doing, like the poems that you're writing, that's not the end of the work, right? I think, and that's a lot of poets, I think they start with they wrote the poems and they're thinking, all right, now that I've written these poems, people are just going to they're going to come into my living room and they're going to read them, and they're going to listen to me read them, and then they're going to give me all the prizes and the money that I deserve for the work. And so I think like just even like you can absolutely elaborate on it, but just like hearing the process, hearing you like, okay, this is not the first time that I've applied, this is my third time, and there's probably countless other examples like that where you're like, yeah, you had to keep applying pressure. And I think that like that's something that our audience really wants to like, wants to hear a little bit more about, and like Jeff talks a lot about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely. I thought I was like a poetry hustler before I met Jeff at Cave Canem, and then Jeff was like, "We're gonna make this work. We're gonna do this." And I was like, "Oh."
He has that effect on people. He has the effect of like looking at you in your soul and like, you're not doing enough though.
Literally, he was like, "So what more can we be doing? What's your plan? What ideas do you have? How are you going to execute this?" Like it was serious. I was like, "Oh, okay. So I'm not hustling hard enough." But it's for me. Poetry has been very much. There's the artistic part, there's the creative part, there's the part that's intuitive, and there are a lot of poems that I keep to myself. And that part of it, I like to keep very separate from the hustle, mentally as much as I can, emotionally even. Like on my computer, the files look so I'll have like my drafts, and I'll have my poems that are, just for me, and then I'll have submission packets in a completely different place, because that's the only way that I can kind of navigate this experience without completely making it a totally like just taking the art or the fun or the beauty out of it, right? But there is the career aspect of it, right? There is I want people to be reading my poems, and I don't really like people in my house, so obviously I have to send the poems out into the world for them to find homes. And so for me, honestly, this has been kind of a 3-year thing. I really started taking poetry seriously in December 2020. And that was a lot due to a lot of things. I had gone to grad school in London, started it, and then I had to come back because of the pandemic. So I was only there for 5 months until March 2020. Now I'm at home. I'm back in Virginia, where I haven't been since, before I left for college. And I have a lot of time on my hands because my degree is virtual. We only have class once a week. And so I was really able to use time in a way that I had never been. And I was just, I was like, well, I've always loved poetry. Let me really put something into it. And I took a whole bunch of workshops virtually, like Tin House, Palm Beach Poetry Festival with Black women. So I got to learn from Patricia Smith and Vivie Francis and Soretta Morgan and Amber Flora Thomas. And consistently in these workshops, they just kept asking me, so where's the book? You have a book, right? Where's the book? Like 12 poems at the time, maybe. And so I was just like, okay, well, people who know what they're talking about seem to think that I should have a book. Let me write towards, that idea. Let me just try to get a book's amount of poems. So I just kind of began sending my work out, got really used to that practice. And I think this is probably like the evolution, I guess, of a 3-year process and investment in putting my work out there.
Yeah. And I like the word you use, like practice, because I think when you send a poem out, and I'm guilty of this as well. I think when the first poem that I ever sent out, actually no, it was the second poem I ever sent out. But the second poem I ever sent out, it was rejected, and I was just like, oh, I guess I'm a terrible poet, and I should stop writing. Don't do this. That's fair. But yeah, so I was just like, okay, I guess I'm a terrible poet, and I guess I should just like stop writing altogether. But when you say something like, this is like you're in the practice of submitting poems, it becomes part of who you are as a writer. You're a person that I write poems. I keep some poems for myself. I edit poems. I put compilations of poems together, and I submit poems out, and things get rejected. Like that's a part of the process. And so it's like it's just really refreshing, and really good and healthy to hear somebody that has accomplished what you have accomplished over the past 24 hours be able to be like, yeah, but to be very, very clear, this is, in order to be here, you have to be willing to get those rejections, because they're going to be part of the process. Yeah.
And I'm glad you said edit, because you have to be willing to edit. And honestly, that's something that was really helpful for me in terms of figuring out, how to navigate rejection. Is I learned that rejection is an opportunity to continue to edit the poem. Now, sometimes the poem is finished, but a lot of times, not even when you get rejected, right? After you send it out, it's immediately like, ooh, there's a typo. Ooh, I could have done that line better, right? And so even in submission, without the rejection coming, for me, that was an opportunity to edit work. So like when I was sending handing out my full-length collection manuscript, I would send it out and then immediately edit, and then send a different version out and then immediately edit. And so I think also rejection is a really a good opportunity to fold in editing practice into your craft.
Yeah. So, and when you're applying for Ruth Lily, it's you're sending in the hard packet, right?
Yep. So it's 10 pages of poems cut off.
So when you send that out, like after you mailed it, did you ever like look at your computer like I should have done this? I should have shown this.
You know what? No. And that's only because with these poems specifically. So yes, like the first couple of times I'd applied, but this time, no, because these poems were already concrete, like set in stone. They're the versions that are going to be in my book. Like these poems were poems. If I sent this application off in 2023, I wrote these poems in 2020, 2021. So I had, gone over them with a fine-tooth comb already. So the only thing I was concerned with was, did I choose the right ones? Was that a good order? Get an exciting one first, and then maybe show like, oh, I wrote a suite of a similar type of poems, and thinking about the different craft elements that I could show. I tried to use unique forms in it to really show a range. That was more of the question for me at that point.
If you were to look back at your application now, there's nothing that you would change. Obviously we know the result, but like, is there anything that you feel like, maybe I would have done a different poem, or maybe I would have done something differently with there?
I favorite poems that like maybe I could have put in, and then maybe that would have made me feel like, oh, these are my favorites, and they liked my favorites and my babies. But a lot of the times your favorite poems, like honestly, the favorite poem in that book is the one that has been the most rejected and never got picked up. And I think that's also part of like that kind of, again, having separate practices or separate thinkings about your experience. Poetry. Like my favorite poems are not necessarily the ones that are going to work the best for the purposes of submitting to a grant, submitting to a prize, whatever. And I've come to learn that over these few years. And then also when you do the Ruth Lily, like the question had been consistently the same until this most recent year. They changed them. And I actually feel like that was beneficial to my application, because it allowed me to go in depth to talk about some of the work that I've done with HBCU writing students, and to talk a little bit more about, some of my influences in depth, to talk about my future goals for poetry. And so actually, I think that benefited me. And so strangely enough, this time was the most confident that I had been in this application. And I'm going to sound very arrogant, but I was not surprised that I was a finalist. I thought I had a fairly good shot at it.
I would have started like spending the money like early, just in case. I'm already in the hole to the loan shark. So now I have to win. Or else. That's why she didn't pick up the phone, man. That would have just improved your package. You sent in some of the most inspiring work. Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, I know. Or else.
I will say with the Ruth Lily too, right? I'm on the earlier end, so it's a range of ages, right? It's 21 to 31. I'm 25. So I think also I was happy with my application, with the caveat that if there were things that I needed to improve about it, I could improve like 6 more times in my rest of my chances for applying to this thing, right? And so it didn't really feel like one of those things where I had to necessarily perfect it this time, like this is my shot, So that I think also goes into some of like why I liked that application.
Ariana, first of all, Cave Canem people say hey. Cassie, Tracy, Greg's. Yeah. I imagine your whole what group were you in?
People, Group A.
Group A. Okay. So everyone says hey. So we're all super excited. How do you feel that like? I'll put it this way. At Cave Canem, we talked a lot about business. I want to talk about your podcast a bit, but kind of where do you see your poetry going from a professional standpoint moving forward?
Sure. That's a really interesting question right now, because I kind of don't know. My first book is coming out in a few weeks. And I don't really know what poetry looks like on the other side.
We had to mix up. I'm sorry.
That's supposed to be a news flash. Like you gotta prep us. It's like, oh, I got a special announcement. You got a special announcement. My book is coming out.
Yeah.
A clap.
There's a book coming out.
But it's no, you got to do the news flash.
All right, sorry. That was on us.
That's great.
That was a. All right. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's great.
My Bring Bang kind of covers all sins. So.
No, yeah. So yeah, my first collection, Dante will be mad if I don't say this. My first collection, winner of the 2022 Cave Canem Prize, Black Pastoral, from University of Georgia Press, is going to be out in a few weeks. And I think in a lot of, in my experience at least, the goal in poetry is that book, at least in the stage of your career. And so honestly, I've been spending a lot of time thinking lately, like, okay, I've hit that milestone. What is the next thing for me, right? What does it look like next? And I have a few ideas about really branching out formally, branching out content-wise, and also just a few ideas about I really love to get to teach more and like do more workshops and like really kind of engage with the community. And I'm a nature poet, so I'd love to teach non-poets and to go out into the community in that way. And yeah, also, I don't know, hopefully continue to make this thing like a profitable experience. But yeah, that's a good question and one I don't necessarily have the concrete answer to right now.
You just won $27,000. Okay, save some for the rest of us.
So yeah, I mean, if you had to take some of that money towards a poetry project, what's the project going to? What's the first one you have in mind?
Oh man, I would love to work with like a local botanical garden, a local conservatory maybe, and write poems that are almost like label texts that go with, you know, the plants, the animals, and then use that as a kind of community project where we're writing poems again about like the plants, the animals, looking at their histories, looking at their habitats, and really thinking about how we can bridge creativity with landscape. Because to me, the kind of crux of like my poetry is an idea of being an eco poet, is that through writing we're adding affect to these kind of abstract concepts, right? Like we talk about global warming, we talk about environmental decay, but a lot of the, you know, language around it is sciencey, is not always accessible. But if we can put a feeling behind that language, which I think poetry primarily is its goal, is putting feeling behind language, then I think we can really change the way that we engage with those conversations, and maybe we approach our conservation efforts for the planet. So yeah.
Ariana, they should be paying you for that. You shouldn't be spending.
I mean, I guess so. I mean, I'm kind of envisioning, I guess, a retreat, right? Like we're gathering poets, and you know, I'm helping, you know, foot the bill for people to stay in a specific location, and people to come and eat together, and you know, people to go, you know, have experiences at different locations, field trips and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
having run retreats, that makes more sense because they are not cheap. It's not cheap to run a retreat.
Okay, how long were you in? You said you were in London for what, the 5 months?
Okay, so the London timeline is a little weird, right? So I went first in September 2019. I was there until March 2020, pandemic hit. I took a year plus off. So I finished my degree, right? The degree ends in September 2020. Then I took a year off. Because I didn't want to be living in London by myself in COVID. I felt like that would be honestly really depressing and, you know, just really an overwhelming experience. And so I took a year off, stayed home for a year, returned to do, so I got the Marshall Scholarship, which you can do 2 one-year degrees on that program. So I did my first 1-year degree, returned in fall 2021 to do my second degree. And then I was there for like the better part of a year, I guess fall 21 until July 22. And that one went straight through.
Well, yeah. Okay. So, and we went there a couple years ago, and we actually met there. I can't remember, and it's gonna rack my brain, but I know her first initials were JC, and she's a poet there. And one of the really cool things, I was like, I did an interview with her. What was that?
No, that's Joelle Taylor. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of the person.
Well, actually, no. Matter of fact, Ajane, she did an interview with her, so I'm sure. Oh, am I?
Just a little high. You're good.
There we go.
Sorry.
Yeah, Ajane did an interview with her. I mean, I'm sure you and Ajane probably talked about the eco stuff already, right? I don't know if I'm allowed to.
We didn't
I
get
don't know if I'm allowed to say things. Never mind. Never mind.
Like embargo, but we didn't get too deep into the eco parts of it in that interview. So yeah.
Okay, well, she's a huge proponent, but like we actually spoke with somebody in London, and she's actually she contributed to EcoTheo, the mag that the journal that Ajane is a part of, and it was just so cool, kind of like hearing her like express, like, you know, talking about like doing retreats and kind of doing things for poets and for like non-poets that are like things that have like the conservation of the planet at its base, but integrate poetry as kind of like the side project to saving the. Well, I guess everything is probably should be a side project to saving the planet, right? Yeah. More than likely, yeah. It's like I mainly do poems, but when I'm not doing poems, I'm like the planet we
need to do like, what is that hot sauce commercial where I put that on everything? That's what we need to be doing with the conservation effort at this point.
Absolutely. But also, while you were in London, did you ever have like the meal where it was just like cold beans and some bread?
I refuse to put the beans on the toast, man. I do not like beans. Beans should not be sweet. I'm not that is my like southern hot take. I don't like baked beans.
Jeff pushed that button, not me.
I do not like baked beans, and I definitely wasn't going to ruin. I'm like, why would I desecrate a perfectly good piece of toast with beans? I didn't do it.
Listen, okay, so we were at this like hotel, and we were at this hotel for the days like leading up to the retreat that we were going to, and what like we're at that hotel for I think 2 days. No, it was a day and a half. So when we were at the little breakfast nook area where everybody was like eating their breakfast, like I saw like all these families, like everybody, there was all these things that were there for breakfast, but like the one thing that everybody had was like this side plate, and their side plate had like the bread and the beans. And I'm just like, why? Well, first of all, like, why are you guys having baked beans like in the morning time? Like the sun just came up. Okay, it just came up. That's barbecue food. Okay, we need that later on. And okay, I will say this, and maybe it's the hemisphere. Okay, maybe it's because like I was just in a different country, different state of mind, but that version of me was pleasantly surprised.
Who are you?
Who? Oh, I'm cultured. I'm cultured, buff.
You're going on a list. You're going on a list.
You've been to like England. I'm cultured.
I'm just saying, like, it doesn't make a lot. Again, I probably wouldn't do it here. Okay. Actually, no, I guess
you would not do that in my house.
I probably wouldn't do it. I'm just like Mr. Beast. I was like, I have 17 gallons of baked beans and 2,300 loaves of bread. But no, I'm just saying this as a non sequitur, just to be clear. Okay. It's not the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
Wow.
Did you try smushy peas?
Smushy peas? No. Are you? Is that the thing that like they have in a little? It's like a
that little green stuff that they put that it looks like wasabi, but it's not. With the fish and chips. You didn't go that.
I didn't have it. No. Okay. Well, so I can't have fish. Well, I guess I can't. I can't eat shellfish in a lot of places that like make.
Yeah, they don't.
Stuff, like, out. So I just like try to keep away from it. So yeah, I didn't have it though. But
no, the smushy peas.
No, it was. Would you go back? Would you go back to London?
Oh, absolutely. I loved it. I had such a great time. That's the thing. British food, I'm not going to say too much on their culture, but British food was not for me. But generally in London is amazing. Now, this is probably because of like colonialism, But the Indian food, the Pakistani food, the East Asian food, the East African food, the Caribbean food is bussin', and it's everywhere. So honestly, I was never hurting for a good meal. I had all my spots. The Mediterranean food. Yeah, so I love it. I'm obviously a very huge foodie, as I've listed so many different categories. And also the art scene was amazing. I love being able to, I lived close enough to the Tate that I could walk along the Thames and go to the Tate. I could walk to the National Poetry Library. That was my favorite place. At the South Bank Center. And so the art scene was really cool, seeing, just different theater. I got to see a lot of theater. It was easy to get around with the tube. And so I say that London is like New York if it was clean, more polite, and slightly more boring. And so for me, that...
Can we talk about okay, and like this could be the last, or we could talk about it a lot, but London, I think I haven't been somewhere where people were so urgently trying to help you, and it was almost uncomfortable, because it was like we got off of the train and we're like, people can kind of tell, they can point out all these tourists. They're not from here. Well, first of all, I was trying to put on, my best, like, hey, bruv, I was trying to do that, like,
you were trying to do it in the Mandems. You was
but I don't know how convincing it was. But yeah, so like me and Ajane were like looking at our phones and we're trying to figure out, okay, are we going this way? And this like guy, he like gets off the train and he's like on a bike. I think he's a courier, and it was like he just comes up to us, where are you trying to go? And then like we were pointing him out. He's like, oh, I'm going that way. Follow me. And then like and when I say like, it was really weird because it was like, I think if I was here, I would be less trusting. If I was here, I'd be like, if I didn't know where I was going, and even in a city that I hadn't been to, if I was just like in a city, in America, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. He was just like, here, please follow me. Like, and he was like, really, like, I'm telling you, I know where to go. And we follow him. He gets up, he like points us out, and then he just goes away into the crowd. And I'm like, did I imagine? Was this my? Is this my conscience?
You created it to lead you.
Did I make him? Am I an omniscient God?
No, that's true. The Deliveroo bikers, they were like super, super friendly and very, very helpful. I mean, I know them a lot, as I was clearly ordering a lot of food, as we've established. But people were super friendly, pretty helpful. I will say that kind of extends like the further out that you get, like maybe when you're in kind of the more posh, rich parts, they're not really trying to, talk to you like that. But London has boroughs, like New York has boroughs, right? And so I was living, especially more like the second year, I was living in East London. It was a heavily Black and brown and like Muslim community, and it was great. Like people were friendly. I would go to the market and banter back and forth, and then pick up my little snack on the way back from the tube. And so it was definitely that. Like people were really, really friendly, and I had a great experience there. So yeah.
I was gonna say, so I mean, I think one of the things that I really enjoyed our time there, and we were there for a much smaller, it's like shorter amount of time, so I'm sure you were able to explore a lot more. But there is this, and I didn't really realize it until we were over there, but I think there's this like undergirding tension like everywhere you go in the States, because it's like, we talk about gun violence or just violence altogether, you know what I mean? Like this violence in general. And I don't know, I don't know about the violence statistics or whatever that's going on over there, but I just know that like it felt like there's this tension lifted, right? It felt like I'm like, not necessarily completely, but I'm just like walking around like, okay, there's not like a lot of things going on. And like where I'm from, it's like, hey guys, like this could be a lot worse. And
I definitely felt way more comfortable. And I mean, obviously, keep your head on the swivel, you see the street smart, but I would consistently come home 3 a.m. I'm getting off the bus, I'm walking down, not the most well-lit places like to get home. And I felt a lot safer because one, I think a lot of the violence in London is specific to interpersonal conflict, whereas in America, right, you have to worry about more random acts. That was at least my experience with it. And then also, again, they don't have guns, so it's like, well, what are you gonna do, stab me? So it's a little bit of, as an American.
Come on, bruv. Put the stick away, bruv. Put the poker away, bruv.
So it's safety is important, but you definitely it makes you more overconfident, and also it did make me more comfortable in that way. So yeah, that's absolutely part of it.
Do you feel like that mindset or that kind of that maybe relief kind of affects your creativity in a way? Like, do you think like, because I know when I was there, it's, and I don't want to say, I don't want to say, other than my accent, which was perfect, by the way.
No.
I didn't really change.
Can you demonstrate?
What was that?
Can you
Can
demonstrate?
you demonstrate?
I'll do it. I'll slip it in later on. So like, and then by the end of it, you're like, oh, this is a proper gentleman over here.
Oh, proper gentleman. All right.
Oh, come on.
Horrible.
See how delayed that button is. But yeah, like, I think that when we were over there, after the first couple days, like, because again, we were just like that. We would stay out fairly late, and we would be kind of walking the streets, and it's just like, yeah, like, I should feel a little afraid or something like that, but I really don't. Does that affect your writing, or does it affect your creativity in any way?
I think it definitely made me less nervous to explore, less nervous to like go out and do different things that I then made their way into some of my writing at some point. And it's funny, I haven't like honestly done a whole lot of writing about like kind of my experience living in London and how the intensely urban kind of landscape, but also it has all these green spaces. So I really want to be able to explore my time there more. But I will say that was the main thing. Like, it didn't make me feel so anxious to go places that I had never been, to go places by myself, and to just kind of, explore in that way. Yeah.
Did you notice any differences in just the types of poetry people are writing in the UK versus here?
I would say a greater percentage of poets in the UK come from slam. And I would say, or like some kind of like performance background. And I would say like a greater percentage of them kind of started in their youth. Like, not that I guess, I don't know, I was old, but like started in high school a little bit more and have been doing it for like a long time and really in the game in that way. And maybe I would say in terms of the subject matter, I would say US poetry is a little bit more slanted towards lyrical, personal works, confessional. UK poetry, I think, is really often really interested in kind of current events, things that are going on, which interested me because I'm somebody who likes to write about current events, who likes to write about history. And so I really enjoyed being in that kind of playground while I was there.
That's cool. Did you ever go to what is it? Apples and Snakes? Is that the or is that the brand?
No, there were events. Yeah. I went to Apples and Snakes. That was actually probably the first poetry event that I went to at the Tate. It was Jasmine Gardosi. I'll never forget because her poems were so and so good. And I think she's like blown up now. And that was just a really, really cool experience. So yeah, I went to Apples and Steaks. We also had these things called rap parties. Those were hosted by alums. And so it was at the London Library, which was cool to have a rap party in the library. But so people would read 2 poems. Each poet that was scheduled would read 2 poems. And then they would play a song, and it had to be hip hop or rap that kind of spoke to the vibe of it. And then people would dance and vibe out a little bit. And then we would get more poems. And that was really fun.
That sounds really. I feel like I had never been to, and that like that actually, we didn't get a chance to go to one of those. We went to the show, the open mic, the day after we left from the retreat, and I was like, we're in London, like we have to go to an open mic, like we have to at least go to an open mic. And that was a really, and I don't know if you experienced a lot of open mics like that in the States. I think that it was one of the most refreshing things about it was there was I mean, I don't know, you were there like 200, probably 300, closer to 300. Like there was a lot of people there. That's firstly. Yes. And then the entirety of the premise of the open mic, and I'm sorry I'm spacing on the host's name, but he was an incredible host. But the entire premise.
Was it Peter DeGraff Johnson, Repeat Beat Poet? Was it PJ?
I'm spaced on the name. I have it somewhere in my Instagram memory.
He hosts a lot of open mic.
but it's so cool because it was, I think when we're talking about poetry communities, I was like that is probably one of the more healthy. I think the ways you would display like how healthy is your poetry community. Oh, you have 300 people coming out to all support an open mic, and there's 100 people that are 100 or maybe more people that are signing up on the open mic, and only 10 people are going to perform on this open mic. And not only does everybody accept that premise, but they're not even mad afterwards. They're like, after the show's over, everybody's just super excited and they're super loving, and they're around everybody and they're congratulating everybody that performed, and they're wanting to hear more of their work, and they're talking about their work. I mean, we spent, I think, like 2 hours after the show just like talking about work, talking about, why they chose those poems. Like, why did you choose to do that poem? And I'm like, okay. And I'm not saying that couldn't happen here. I think that there's a lot of poetry communities that, like, if you were to tell a lot of poets, you have a 1 out of 10 chance of performing. Even if you get there on time, you sign up on the list, you have a 10% chance of getting on the open mic, but you probably won't. It would reduce the amount of maybe people that go. So I think that that thought of poetry community and that thought of people just really enjoying to see work. Like, I know, we talked a lot about your personal work already, which is again fantastic. Congrats on I think who said it? LeBron was like, he was just like, I'm not here for like the personal, I'm here for like the team achievements. But like you like got the rings, but then you also like got the MVP, right? So but like, can you tell us about like, what poetry community kind of means to you, or what you get? Because when we talked about, what you got from poetry community in that 3 years, from when you were like really taking it seriously, like, how did the poetry community help you grow?
Yeah, I think this is such a good question too, because I think a lot about the differences between poetry community in the UK and the US. And I will say that for me, even though my poetry journey, like taking myself seriously as a poet, started when I was physically in the US, the root of it is actually in UK poetry, because I did this program. It was a retreat, but it was virtual because COVID, called the Obsidian Foundation UK. And it was founded by Nick McCoha, and it was inspired by Cave Canem. So they wanted to have like a British and global Cave Canem experience. And so I did that. I was in Group E that time. And those are really, really my like poetry OG community. And I think the ways that I experienced poetry in that space was really unique. And it's also one of the big differences, I think, in the UK community. Like, non-poets really do support poetry a bit more. People generally support the arts a bit more in the UK, in my experience. I think we are trained to value that in the United States. And also we had such different levels of, investment is not the right word, but such different levels of aspiration, I will say, for what you wanted to do as a poet. So some people, the goal was, I want to be a working poet. I want to have a book. I want to make my, and some people, there was actors in my group. There were visual artists in my group. There were photographers in my group who were like, I want to engage in poetry because I think it will enrich me as an artist, as a creative, as a thinker. And so it was really, really organic in that way. And we were able to focus on the art and the creation in that way. And so, I think in that way, like, that was my experience. And I'm so glad, honestly, that my first experience with poetry community was in the UK and was so genuine and was with all Black poets. Because then when I kind of, you go out into the world, right? And you're in, different spaces that are labeled, prestigious, different spaces that, mean different things. You always have a root to return to, or I always have a root to return to that was very genuine, extremely supportive. Also, Cave Canem fellows and people were the workshop leaders, right? So my first workshop leader was Dante. And I actually wrote the title poem of my book in Dante's workshop. And I also had Raymond Antrobus, right? And so it was like a very much an overlap and a bridging of those communities as well. And so to be able to start there and have my experience as a poet and community rooted there kind of gave me a model for my practice in community moving forward.
Yeah, that's all. I think once we were over there, and I kind of had the same feeling as you. It's like a lot of these people are people that are they just want to be do poems long term, and they want to do poems for life, as opposed to, you know, that they don't want to have like necessarily a 9 to 5. And I think a really large difference is there's people there that they really want to do poems, and they really want to be able to feed themselves off of poems and make a living off of poems. And I think maybe the difference is the culture here with a lot of spaces is people that want to be famous off of poems, which are, again, they could be the same thing, but typically it's like there's a really large kind of gap between, you know, somebody. Yeah.
The path to those things, so the path to eating off your poems in the United States and the UK are very. In the US, the path to eating off your poems is academia. You have to go through, you have to do that MFA, you have to, you know, publish kind of the more academic journals. It's primarily, it leans towards the page, which to me slants towards academic writing, poetry, whatever. In the UK, it slants towards performance. You're out there on the stage. You are having people see you. You are connecting with the people, right? You get down off the stage and now you're talking with the poems and you're engaging. And so to me, maybe in the paths being so different, that also lends itself to a bit more of that kind of active person-based community.
Kind of speaking to that a little bit. So at Cave Canem, I know you haven't launched it yet, but one of the things that you and I started working on was just kind of getting you ready for launching your own podcast and things like that. There's a podcast. Breaking news.
That sounds like the Avengers are about to like break you.
It does.
So what kind of inspired you to start pursuing that sort of work with poetry?
You know, because I learned most of what I know from podcasts. So we've talked about, right, that year in time where I was just writing poetry. I was just pursuing, I was trying to teach myself. It was the first time that I hadn't been in school. And, you know, those workshops are great, but that's a week. And those workshops are also often based on poems that you've already written. So they're not necessarily always generative. They're not necessarily always focused on craft, so much as editing, so much as professional opportunities and networking, right? Which is very important. But when I wanted to learn craft, when I wanted to learn how to write a poem, how to be able to manipulate the words on the page and make them do the dances I wanted them to do, I went to podcasts. Verses was obviously one of the first poetry podcasts that I listened to. I started listening to Verses in undergrad, back when it was like Dinesh and Franny, and then loved the transition to Ajane and Brittany. It was so excited. I was like, oh my God, Verses.
They're okay.
Black women, that's so cool. Not they're okay. Listen, I have to that was my original teaching tool. And I've probably listened to the complete series of a couple of dozen poetry podcasts. I mean, just interview after, and it was really just one a day, honestly. I would do it on my commute. I had about a 40-minute tube commute to school. Even when I went back to London, I would listen on my commute, on the walk. And the things that I learned about craft, down to the line breaks, down to, you know, the title is itself a line in the poem, down to length and form. Eduardo C. Corral talks about when he's editing how he thinks about changing the form as pouring a liquid from one container into the next. And even though the liquid is the same, the shape of it and how it's structured is different, right? I learned that from listening to a podcast. And so for me, I see podcasts as a really interesting teaching tool. And it's something that I, you know, wanted to just contribute to and give back to. And I also saw a pretty big gap in who was being interviewed on these podcasts. And I learned a lot. Like now we're talking about, like, you know, Twitter, online spaces, community workshops, things like that. I learned a lot from poets who didn't have a book or a big, you know, prize, or Ruth Lilly, and so weren't necessarily being interviewed on the podcast, but had so much to say about craft, about practice, about what poetry means, about being a good community member. And so that's when the idea came to me of, well, I want to interview these people. And I also want to break down that false dichotomy of, oh, if you're not really, you know, if you don't have a book, you're not really a poet yet. You're not really in that kind of arena, or you're in, because also everybody's goal is not to have the first book. And so the idea was then to interview poets that are before the book. And then I brought that to Jeff, who literally, like, I owe you so much, man. He carried that equipment all around that campus for me, set it up and broke it down 5 times.
Okay, see, that's a proper application of this, but okay.
It's true.
For good measure.
I mean, it's true. And I so you wrote on the whiteboard, you know, if you have any interest in talking about podcasts, about media and poetry, here's my number, text me. So I texted, and you know, we talked, and you know, gave the idea of, you know, having an experienced poet, right? So we have poets on both sides of that first book conversation, and then putting them together and letting them talk about these things. And so then we found pairs of poets there, and you were serious. I remember like getting that text. You were like, "So do you have the list of people yet? Like, are we doing this or not?" Like I think somebody came up to me during lunch the next day and tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "Just looking for you." He's like asking.
He used to be a bounty hunter, and then he transitioned into poetry, and then he just decided,
this is way more
I'm going to keep my skill set.
So maybe if we talked about it like on Monday, by Tuesday I had like a complete like, you know, guest list and schedule, and then we started doing those episodes for the rest of the week, and so we got 5 episodes done, some between 2 Cave Canem poets, some between a Cave Canem poet and faculty, some between a Cave Canem poet and staff. And so it was really, really great to see what came out of those conversations. And I hope also to kind of, again, just like demystify the ideas around the first book, the ideas around what it means to be a published poet. And really, you know, so I'm looking forward to being able to put those out there, you know, when I get a chance to work on it. But yeah, I was really, really grateful for that experience.
Are you not releasing the name yet, or is there a name already?
Oh, it's before the book. Before the book. That's what I have.
Oh, it's called Before the Book.
Before the book.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now you shouldn't have, now I was supposed to push the button and then you're supposed to say it, but now
I'm sorry.
I have a limit. Now I can't do it anymore. So now we just wasted it. But Before the Book, if you're listening to this right now, then when is it releasing?
Oh, I don't have a date yet. My target is probably going to be like early 2024, getting edits and getting promo and making sure that, you know, people know that it's coming. Probably in 2024.
Well, if you're listening to this at any point in history, then you should be listening to, well, actually, if you're listening to this at the point in history where Before the Book has already started, then you should, after you've done listening to this, you should then listen to an episode of Before the Book.
Before the Book.
No.
And if you figured out how to time travel, then you can, then
you probably got a lot of other things to do if you figure out time. But
you would think so, but
I guess I would be using time travel for very goofy and unserious stuff, and like this would definitely fall under that category. So yeah,
you would just come back and like just be in the background of your own interview.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, like, okay, like, what were you saying? Did that make sense? Do we need to work on it? Yeah.
It's actually going to be coming out earlier than that. Say earlier.
We don't know. But, you know, yeah, I think, you know, this fall is going to be pretty hectic for me because I'm still in my MFA program and I'm teaching and I have to take a class and I have to do a workshop, and then my book launch is going to be in a few weeks, and then I'm touring and doing other stuff. So
you say that you're highly accomplished, okay?
I don't know.
Okay, clearly everybody listen.
Listen, this is just
by the time you're even
life.
By the time, if you're listening to this at any point in the future, she's a lot more famous than she is right now. Okay, and I am the person that got her there. So whatever advice, however I can monetize that.
So Ariana, what kind of pushed you to pursue an MFA?
That's a good question. Solely teaching. I want to be able to teach at the college level. Specifically, I'd love to go back. I am a proud alumna of Spelman College and HBCU for women. I specifically want to go back and teach at an HBCU. I'd love it for it to be Spelman. But there are no creative writing MFA programs at the over 100 HBCUs in the country. My ultimate goal is to change that. And I just find that really important because, I mean, that's where poetry really started for me. So my first poetry mentor is Sharon Strange, and she is one of the founders of the Darkroom Collective, which gave a lot of birth to like the current iterations of Black poetry that we have. And they started it at James Baldwin's funeral, and it was founded at Harvard. And there's so many brilliant Black poets, Natasha Trethewey and John Keats and Tracy K. Smith and Major Jackson, all in that lineage, right? So I was working with the person who found it, which you would never know. She would never have said anything. I Googled her because I was a student in the class and found out, that this is who she was. And I didn't really know anything about poetry like that at the time. So I didn't really even know the gravity of what I was saying, but I knew she was somebody that I needed to learn from. I feel like the way that I was taught poetry, creative writing in general, was so steeped in a specific canon of Blackness, was so steeped in specific practices of Black craft, Black writing, Black histories. And I feel like we should have a place to have that experience, especially for continuing learners. I would love for it to be a low residency program, so you don't have to move and pick up your whole life, because there are so many people, right, who went to college, you go to school, you get the degree, you do what you have to do. I was very, privileged to be able to go to Spelman because I had a scholarship, because I certainly couldn't have afforded it otherwise. So there are a lot of continuing scholars who maybe wanted to have that HBCU experience and would like to come back and be able to then learn to write and have your work be, workshopped in a space like a Cave Canem or an Obsidian, right? Where it's, your cohorts are Black and they understand, right? You don't necessarily have to filter or translate some of the things that you're writing about, right? And also you don't feel pressured necessarily to write about Blackness, right? You're the Black poet, right? So you're going to write about Blackness in, a space like that. If we're all Black, that's the common denominator. Now you don't have to write towards the common denominator. You can write towards your own idiosyncrasies. And that was really the value of an HBCU experience for me. It allowed me to understand as something more than just, oh, that's the smart Black girl, right? But when we're all the smart Black girl, who are you? What do you love? What do you value? What are you interested in? That's what that gave me. And so I'd love for people
that's some heat. That's some heat. I don't know. Nah, but that was some heat, because I feel like that's a feeling that I never really contextualized before. It's a feeling that I think a lot of people feel, but it's you don't really necessarily contextualize, because I think that a lot of writers, because of the fact that in so many other a lot of the poetry community is a compilation of the people that were really good at writing in school, or they were really recognized for writing throughout school, and maybe they're at these poetry shows, or maybe now they're in these programs, and now they're all that one person in this one space. And so it's okay, so once we're all here. Now I'm not the guy I'm not the only person that can speak to the Black experience or the male, I am one of the community that we're all here. And so if the only thing that I'm doing is I'm using the vehicle that we're all in to get to where I'm going, okay, no, hold on, we have to figure some other things out, right? And
the cars fall apart. The tires are gonna, and that's getting into my other opinions about poetry and just kind of retreaded content. But the car is gonna fall apart. The tires are gonna wear, right? We're going to keep covering the same ground.
Tires wear down.
I guess so.
That's what happened.
I think that's. I remember when I was at Kalu the last year that they had it. That's one of the big takeaways I had from 5E. It's just a Black poem, to write a Black poem. If you're a Black poet, any poem you write is a Black poem. You don't have to incorporate different things. It's just by being you. And that's true for any group, right? If you're identified as a category, your poems are that category.
And this is not putting that on poets, by the way, because I feel like there's a lot of pressure to write towards your identity, because that's what a lot of these all seem to want, right? They seem to want, oh, we're looking for diverse poets. Well, how can you show you're diverse beyond just, okay, checking a black box, especially when that's often not their reading, anonymously, right? And so they're not necessarily seeing who you are. So if you're aiming for diversity, what other way is there than through the content of the poem itself to identify who is a diverse person, right? And so I'm not even putting this on, the poets. I think there is, especially within American poetry, a kind of pressure to write towards some of your identities, whether that's Blackness, whether that's queerness. And so I think in a lot of ways, I'm hoping to create some spaces that are more freeing in that way, and to be able to write towards your own instincts.
Well, I'm excited for the day that you're teaching in front of your class and then somebody Googles you and they're like, oh, you won the Ruth Lily. And then
No, wait.
I had no
She
idea.
was on the diversity.
She was, oh my gosh, she knows Jeff and Matthias. What? And one of them invented time travel and they're here with us right now.
Whoa, like guys, I mean, this is really a lot for me. Like, this is like in the room with celebrities.
I don't want to overwhelm you with our fame.
I'm sure the Versus podcast that comes out later.
In the background, like it's literally heat that y'all are giving me, and so yeah.
We actually have to put that out soon, but we're gonna let it go for right now. I mean, naturally, whatever damage it causes, but we do. That is an immediate concern of ours.
Yeah. Okay.
Ariana, I know we've already had you so long. I know that you were at a. What did you do last night, Ariana? You can tell people. Where were you?
This is the climax of that. Wait, hold on.
Yes, I was at the show, the event of the year, the Renaissance World Tour, honey, in St. Louis.
Yeah, the Renaissance World Tour. And for all the people that don't know, there is an artist. She is a singer, dancer, choreographer. She's kind of bubbling up. She's kind of growing in her fame here in the U.S. She's an actress. She played a couple roles. And I mean, she's kind of dabbling. And I personally, I think she. And I don't know if I'm kind of speaking past my experience here, but I think she has the potential to be one of the biggest singers of our day. Not now, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, we gotta give Ariana Grande some time to roll. But for
I do love Ariana Grande. I was listening to
Shout out to Ariana Grande.
I was listening to that on the school bus every single day in high school. I think it's the 10-year anniversary of that album. I'm ready for the performance. Like, she can sing. But I would say Beyonce is the greatest performer of her generation to me.
That's if we're we can excluding Kanye West, but then okay, so Beyonce.
Yeah.
Hang on.
We don't have to.
But I say, right, like performer meaning Kanye don't dance, right? And so that's what I give the category, because I give Kanye a lot. Does Kanye he be hitting the one
too? That kid ghost when he was doing the robot. You didn't see that?
I'm going to end this. We can debate. We'll have the music podcast later. Ariana, if you had to give what's one thing? So we know you have a podcast episode coming out with Versus soon. You've been with us. What is something that hasn't come up in either of these interviews that you think is super, super, super crucial for people to know about poetry or the Ruth Lily or anything that you feel is important?
That is a good question. I think it's really, really crucial for people to understand that I didn't do this without help. And I mean that in the most sincere, I'm not trying to be, humble way, but honestly, I was able to focus on poetry for a year. Everybody doesn't have that privilege. And I say that to say, because I think a lot of times, in communities, especially so small, there's a lot of comparison, right? And there's a lot of people who say, well, how did you get there? How do I do what you do? I'm telling you that what I was able to do, the recipe is highly irregular and probably not able to be recreated, right? You'd have to have specific conditions. But also, I think poetry is something that everybody has to have their own recipe for. So yeah, I like to be very, very honest. I've been very, very fortunate. Honestly, the flip of the coin has gone my way a lot in this poetry game. Sometimes it just comes down to a coin flip. It's gone my way a lot. And I can say that with confidence, understanding that I'm a talented writer. I put a lot of work into this and it's good, but the coin has fallen my way a lot. I was able to take a year and just focus on my poetry and live at home. Everybody doesn't have the financial means to do that, the opportunities to do that. And so I say that to say, consider when you think about, I want to be like this poet, I want to have their career, consider the context in which they were able to do what they were able to do. And then think about how you can make your context work best for you. And it's not a race. If you write one poem, a month, I'm a pretty slow writer. If you write one poem a month, to me, that's a good amount of poems. And in a few years, okay, you'll have a book, you know? And so it really, to me, is about making your own recipe and following your own path in this thing. But I like to be very transparent about the opportunities that I've had. And because it's really been a big factor in getting to where I am.
That is what's up. All right, Ariana, I know you're super tired. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. We're excited about your future podcasts. I know we'll be in talks about that because we gotta get that going. Put the work in. Congrats on again winning your award. That's super exciting. We're excited to see where the work takes you in the future. See you at Cave next year, maybe.
See you. Thank you so much, Matthias and Jeff. This has been like a super great conversation. Honestly, I've had a great time talking with y'all.
Yay.
Higher. So yeah,
I think Whitney are cool too, but like, I mean,
we're taller, so I don't know if that shows over the podcast. But
okay, are we? I don't know.
It feels like it should be known.
She's a little. All right. Thank you so much. We'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys later. It's been Diverses Live. Take care, guys. Have a good night.
See ya.